If I had to bet, it would be the classified documents
Yeah,
crimes because
yeah.
those are so easy to prove, and frankly, they're so dangerous and damaging. And we need to send a message that it's just not okay to steal our nation's secrets.
Yeah. Well, speaking of which, that's what happened with this Capitol rioter. Boy, Glenn, I don't know about you. I can imagine Mike Fanone. I get traumatized seeing this video
Yeah.
over every time, his body cam footage where, they dragged him into the mob yelling, "I got one." I mean, I just thought it was interesting what Officer Fanone said. He urged the judge to sentence the writer to the maximum, saying he had cut his career in law enforcement short, suffered a heart attack, a traumatic brain injury, and he said, "Show him the same mercy he showed me on January 6th, which is none." So, what is your take on? Obviously, this is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, 7.5 years is a good start. I know Mike Fanone well. I worked murder cases with Mike when I was a prosecutor in D.C. He's the real deal. And it's funny, people see him now and they say, he comes across as sort of troubled and dark and sad. And I said, I will never take away anything from what he went through. But the Mike you see now is the Mike that I knew and worked with 20 years ago. He is a very serious, dedicated, committed law enforcement member. And now all of that has been taken away from him
Yeah.
by Trump's supporters, whom Trump told to go attack the Capitol. I mean, let's never forget who's responsible for the whole production. It's Donald Trump.
Right. Well, and by the way, I think it was Eric Swalwell this week that said, Trump's wall of protection is crumbling. I mean, so let's talk about that. January 6th, first of all, hang on a second. Trump lawyers and DOJ, we know, met yesterday in a sealed hearing related to the Mar-a-Lago investigation. I don't know what you make of that because it was notable. It would typically be in Florida or New York for the documents thing. So what do you think this was about?
Oh, this is the Department of Justice overcoming assertions of privilege by these witnesses before the grand jury. And they will win that battle 10 times out of 10 because you can go in front of Congress and you can invoke all the privileges you want, attorney-client privilege, executive privilege, magical unicorn privilege. And Congress doesn't have the ability, they don't have the vehicle to overrule it. So they just have to kind of accept it. Guess what? Federal prosecutors in the grand jury have an easy way to overcome those assertions of privilege if they're bogus. You go right to the chief judge, you litigate it, and the chief judge orders the witness to testify. And the beauty of that is the witness then has complete legal cover because the judge has ordered him or her to testify, and nobody can come back at them for violating a privilege. So that is what I believe is going on behind closed doors in federal court in D.C.
Okay. Also, Secret Service stuff. 6 Secret Service agents are in the crosshairs of the House Select Committee investigating January 6th. They're wrapping up review of more than 1 million pages of Secret Service documents. They plan to bring in the top agents, including Tony Ornato, who is this, Trumpy that, has not gone on their oath to refute what Cassidy Hutchinson said, among other things, right? But I mean, more and more disturbing stuff coming out every day, right, about Secret Service. They did not brief Mike Pence, or his team about online threats uncovered before the January 6th attack. They were aware of the threats against Pence, including one saying he would be a dead man walking if he didn't do the right thing. Pence and his team were never briefed. They only learned of them when they were made public during the hearing. So we're hearing the same about, of course, threats to Pelosi and Schumer, etc. Talk to us about all that.
Yeah, I mean, this is something, it's bigger than politics. If you're supposed to protect the president, protect high government officials, and you are motivated by politics or ideology, that's something we have to rip out the root. And I think that's what Congress is trying to do. Yeah, there are midterms coming up, and it may be that the J6 committee will not be working beyond January, but boy, they've showed no signs of slowing down yet. And I think it's good because they need to figure out if members of the Secret Service were complicit. I don't say that cavalierly or casually. They need to find out if they were complicit. And if they were, it needs to be ripped out by the root, and they need to be prosecuted if their conduct was criminal. Because It's just, I don't care if you're a Republican president, a Democrat. We need to protect folks who are doing the hard work of serving the people, assuming they're doing the hard work of serving the people.
Yeah. It's quite a crime stack by the time you get here Friday, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
It's quite. Trump loses his appeal to keep his taxes hidden from Congress. He, of course, will appeal to the Supreme Court, which he thinks is his. I have heard others say that is unlikely they'll take it. What is the time frame on this now?
Yeah, the Supreme Court has already, in substance, rejected similar claims, like when he was trying to keep all of his tax documents and financial records from the prosecutor in New York, from the district attorney. So I don't think the Supreme Court has any appetite to try to give a relook to an issue that they've kind of already settled. So all of these things have taken far too long. Every sort of justice clock is ticking, but it looks like this one has about run out.
Well, as usual, Glenn, what he's hoping is to delay, and have Republicans take back Congress, and then, shut this down, right? In terms of the House Ways and Means Committee.
Yeah, but if the Republicans take back Congress, I don't think that's a done deal.
Yeah.
But worst case scenario, if that happens, DOJ's criminal investigations and prosecutions will be entirely unaffected and unimpeded. Yes, they're going to try to throw some sand in the gears. They're going to try to, issue all of these frivolous subpoenas and drag DOJ officials in for testimony. None of it, I predict, will impact the pace of DOJ's criminal investigations and prosecutions. And Steph, I'll tell you, God help us if we don't start to see indictments dropping sometime after the midterms and the first of the year. We have got to see these indictments dropping, or else I'm going to be singing a whole nother tune.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, the question you answered on Twitter, this just made me happy, so I'm going to repeat it. Someone named Senator Warren has a plan for that on Twitter. Said the Justice Department should indict Donald Trump for the stolen classified documents now and follow with indictments for January 6th later. Question: if the DOJ has proof Donald Trump already shared those docs, can he go straight to prison or will be within his rights to remain free until after trial? And you said once arrested, indicted, a judge would have to decide if there's a clear and convincing evidence that Trump is either a flight risk or a danger to the community. If the judge concludes he is, then he can be detained pending trial. That is, if the law applies to him as it does to us. Let's hope so, because we were already talking about Bannon, not having to go to jail and appealing this forever, and maybe we'll never go to jail, right?
Yeah, Steph, there's the law and then there's practicalities. I believe that the facts, as we know them, would support a judge's conclusion that Donald Trump is both a danger to society and a flight risk, and therefore should be jailed pending trial. The practicalities. Do I believe judges will have the appetite to jail a former president pending trial? Never mind after trial, after he's been convicted. And he will be convicted. I'm not so sure a judge will have the appetite for it. But you know what? There are so many good judges on the federal district court in Washington, D.C., which is where these cases will be brought. You read some quotes from Amy Berman Jackson, and there's Judge Sullivan, and there's Judge Walton, and there's Judge Mehta, and I don't want to leave anybody. There's Judge Boasberg. Yeah. These are serious, apolitical people who have been ticked off at what Donald Trump has gotten away with by way of federal crimes. Yeah. Well, so, I wouldn't rule out Donald Trump seeing the inside of a jail cell after he's indicted.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I think they finally found a jury that not every single person hates Donald Trump with the heat of 1,000 white hot suns in New York. The prosecutor in the New York criminal tax fraud trial of Trump's real estate company said Thursday if every prospective juror who disliked the former president was excused, there wouldn't be a jury. Mm-hmm. He said that he made a point, though. This is not about Donald Trump. It's about his business. They booted one juror who called Trump narcissistic. Oh, that's...
Oh, wow. Wow. Now a warning?
But he said, honestly, I used to think he was funny before he was president. Then he started acting a little crazy and narcissistic. That's the only reason I didn't like him as president, not so much policy. Well, that seemed to me like about the best they're going to get, right? But you said in general, anyway, on Twitter, the Trump Organization's show trial kicks off today, but thanks to DA Alvin Bragg, Trump will not be held accountable, so let the show trial begin.
Yeah, this is a show trial, plain and simple. Think about it. The organization, Trump's namesake, has been indicted, criminally indicted, for a 15-year-long criminal scheme to defraud in the first degree, bilking the city taxpayers out of their money, the state taxpayers out of their money, and us, the federal taxpayers, out of our money. But for whatever reason, DOJ hasn't seen fit to bring a federal charge yet. Let's hope that changes. And they indicted the chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg, Trump's right-hand man, who helped run the organization as a criminal enterprise for 15 years. But Donald Trump is not indicted. That makes this a show trial, an absolute show trial, because Donald Trump should be the one sitting at defense table.
Yeah, and I mean, without poisoned and partisan, Glenn, they've made the whole judicial system. Of course, people are already talking about if Lee Zeldin, this lunatic, is elected governor of New York, he'll pardon Trump. I mean, I mean, it must really deeply aggrieve you as someone that has, devoted their life to actual justice, to see how this has just become whack-a-mole. Is this a Trump judge, or will this be a Trump governor that'll, pardon this person or protect that person, right?
Yeah, and it does. It breaks my heart, and it's funny. I had a federal judge as a guest lecturer at my class at George Washington University yesterday, talking about, among other things, the state of the federal bench. And in the decades that I was practicing in D.C., Steph, I swear I never once walked into court and said, "Who appointed this judge?" Right. That was not sort of in my consciousness, because to me, it didn't matter. And now it is the first question we ask when we see a decision come down that seems outrageous. Who appointed this judge? And unfortunately, most of the time, when it's a BS decision by the judge, the answer is Donald Trump.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of justice, you tweeted Clarence and Ginny, Donald and Lindsay, and the tangled treasonous web of conflict, crime, and cover up on display for the whole world to see. I mean, that whole thing, just what Ginny and Clarence Thomas. Let's start there, right? Covering for not just his wife but Lindsey Graham. I mean, are there going to be any consequences for any of that? Do you think?
Only if we let there be no consequences. And what I mean by that, Clarence Thomas, again, has waded into territory where he has a conflict, throwing Lindsey Graham a bone, doing him a solid by saying, yeah, you know what? Take your time. You don't have to respond to Fani Willis's subpoena to testify to a Georgia grand jury about Trump's crimes, or frankly, Lindsey, about your own. Let's never forget that Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger said Lindsey Graham called me, and given what he was saying, I interpreted it as, quote, Lindsey urging me to throw out lawfully cast ballots. Yeah. That's a crime. That's another reason Lindsey desperately doesn't want to testify to that Georgia state grand jury. But Clarence Thomas, whose wife is an insurrectionist, we've seen it in her text messages, said, you know what, I'm going to wade into this territory again, and I'm going to cut Lindsey a break and say, he doesn't have to testify yet. And I said, these people up at the Supreme Court seem content to continue to just wallow in the stench of their own illegitimacy. Right. And they better be careful, because at some point, people are going to stop crediting anything that comes down from on high from those 9 justices.
My favorite tweet of yours, poor Justice Alito, he's belly aching about how hard it was on him when his draft opinion revoking women's constitutional privacy rights was leaked, saying how he's looking forward to things getting back to normal. How nice for him. Things aren't going back to normal for women. Thank you, Glenn Kirschner. And finally, the most patriotic tweet was Glenn Kirschner tweeted, I was honored to join the great Stephanie Miller Show crew, along with Rob Reiner on stage last night. Plus, the meet and greet after the show was extraordinary, getting to meet so many democracy warriors. You too can experience it for only $20 at sexyliberal.com. You were great, except for Rob Reiner, who went immediately for the bald joke about both of you. Lowest common denominator comedian. Can't control the man.
What was up with that? Yeah, and he's got the little, fringe in the back, which does not impress me. I'm sorry. I love Rob, and I love you, Steph. I love you guys.
Too.
I was so thrilled to be up on stage.
You two were magic together, you and Rob. You got to see it. Sexyliberal.com. Thank you, honey. See you next week.